Imagine a world with no cars, no engines, no fast roads, no easy travel. If you wanted to visit another city, it could take days, sometimes weeks. People depended on horses, and horses got tired. Then one day, someone asked a strange question. What if a machine could move by itself? Before cars existed, life moved at a very different speed. Most people didn't travel far from where they were born. It wasn't because they didn't want to explore the world, but because traveling was difficult, slow, and sometimes even dangerous. If you needed to go somewhere, you had very simple choices. You could walk, or you could use a horse. Horses were the center of transportation at that time. They pulled carts, carried people, and helped move goods from one place to another. In many ways, they were as important as cars are today. But horses had limits, and everyone knew it. They got tired after long hours, and they needed food, water, and rest. You couldn't just keep going forever. And when the weather turned bad, everything became worse. Roads were not smooth or strong like modern roads. Most of them were just dirt paths. So when it rained, those roads turned into thick, heavy mud. Wheels got stuck, and horses struggled to pull forward. Sometimes people had to climb down from the cart and push with all their strength just to move a few meters. A short trip could suddenly become a long and exhausting journey. Travel was not only slow, but also uncomfortable. Long trips could take days, or even weeks. People had to sleep outside, or stay in small roadside inns. There was no guarantee of safety either. Quiet roads were sometimes dangerous, and robbers could appear when you least expected them. Even inside cities, transportation created new problems. There were simply too many horses. Streets were crowded, noisy, and often dirty. Horses left waste everywhere, and the smell became a serious issue, especially in large cities. People started to worry about health and cleanliness. Some began to ask difficult questions. How can a city grow if movement is so slow? How can people travel faster and more comfortably? How can we reduce the mess and the noise? At first, there were no clear answers. Horses had been part of daily life for hundreds of years. It was hard to imagine a different system. Change felt unlikely, almost impossible. But slowly, new ideas began to appear. People started looking at machines, especially steam engines. These engines were already used in trains, and they were powerful. They could pull heavy loads and work for long hours without getting tired like animals. So a new thought began to form. What if a machine could move a vehicle on a road, not just on rails? What if you didn't need a horse at all? To many people, this idea sounded strange, even ridiculous. A moving machine without a horse? It felt unnatural. Early machines were large, heavy, and loud. They didn't seem practical for everyday use. Still, the idea refused to disappear. It stayed alive in the minds of a few people who believed that travel could be faster, easier, and cleaner. They didn't have all the answers yet, but they had something powerful, a question that refused to go away. And sometimes, one simple question is enough to begin a revolution. As the problems of horse travel became clearer, a small number of people began to think differently. They were not satisfied with the old ways, and they believed machines could do more than anyone imagined. These people were inventors, curious, stubborn, and often misunderstood. At first, many of them looked at steam power. Steam engines were already changing the world through trains and factories. So the idea seemed simple. Take a steam engine and put it on a road vehicle. In theory, it made sense. In reality, it was much harder. Early steam vehicles were big, heavy, and difficult to control. They needed a lot of water and fuel, and it took time just to start the engine. Some of these machines worked, but only for short distances. Others broke down quickly or scared people with loud noises and thick smoke. In the late 18th century, a French inventor named Nicolas-Joseph Cugnot built one of the first self-moving vehicles. It was designed to carry heavy military equipment. The machine could move on its own, which was already amazing, but it was slow and hard to steer. In fact, during one test, it crashed into a wall. It may have been the first car accident in history. Stories like this made people laugh. Many believed these machines were dangerous toys, not serious inventions. Investors were not interested, and governments did not see a clear future for them. For most people, horses still seemed more reliable and practical. But inventors did not stop. They kept testing new ideas, trying different designs, and learning from failure. Over time, a new type of engine began to attract attention: the internal combustion engine. This engine worked in a very different way. Instead of using steam from boiling water, it burned fuel inside the engine to create energy. This made it smaller, lighter, and faster to start. It was not perfect, but it had potential. In the 19th century, inventors like Etienne Lenoir and Nicolaus Otto made important progress. They improved how engines worked, making them more efficient and more practical. Step by step, the idea of a self-moving vehicle became less impossible. Still, there were many challenges. Engines were unreliable, and they often broke down. Fuel was not easy to find. Roads were still rough and not designed for machines. And perhaps the biggest problem was not technical. It was human. People were not ready. Many were afraid of these new machines. They were loud, unfamiliar, and sometimes unpredictable. Some believed they were dangerous. Others thought they were unnecessary. After all, horses had worked for centuries. Why change something that already worked? Because of this, inventors often worked alone. They spent long hours testing ideas that failed again and again. They lost money, faced criticism, and sometimes even gave up. But a few continued. They believed that one day, a machine could replace the horse. Not just in theory, but in real life. Not just for experiments, but for everyday use. It was still only a dream, but now it was a clearer dream. The world was slowly moving from imagination to possibility. What it needed next was someone who could turn that possibility into reality. And that person was already working, quietly, carefully, preparing to change history. While many inventors were experimenting with new engines, one man in Germany was quietly following a very clear vision. His name was Karl Benz, and unlike others, he did not want to improve the horse carriage. He wanted to replace it completely. From a young age, Karl Benz was fascinated by machines. He studied engineering and believed that engines could change the future. But his life was not easy. He struggled with money for many years, and several of his early businesses failed. At times, he was close to giving up. What kept him going was not success, but belief. He believed that a small, lightweight engine could power a vehicle on ordinary roads. Not a train, not a large machine, but something personal. Something that one person could control and use every day. This idea was very different from others at the time. Many inventors were still focused on steam engines or large systems. Benz was thinking about something simpler, smaller, and more practical. But having an idea is one thing. Building it is another. Karl Benz spent years working on his engine. He focused on the internal combustion engine, trying to make it reliable enough for real use. The problem was that early engines often failed. They stopped suddenly, overheated, or didn't produce enough power. Each failure cost time and money, and Benz did not have much of either. There were moments when everything almost collapsed. His workshop faced financial trouble, and people around him began to doubt his work. Some believed his ideas were unrealistic. Others thought he was wasting his life on a dream that would never succeed. But there was one person who never stopped believing in him: his wife, Bertha. She supported him not only emotionally, but also financially. In fact, she used her own money to help fund his work. At a time when many people doubted him, she remained confident that his invention would change the world. With her support, Benz continued. Instead of building a carriage first and adding an engine later, he designed everything together from the beginning. This was an important decision. It meant the machine was not just a modified carriage. It was something completely new. He worked carefully on every detail. The engine, the frame, the wheels, the balance. Everything had to function as one system. It was slow progress, and there were many setbacks. But step by step, the idea began to take shape. Finally, in 1885, after years of effort, Karl Benz completed his machine. It had 3 wheels, a small engine, and a simple design. It didn't look like modern cars, but it could do something incredible. It could move on its own. No horse. No external power. Just a machine, controlled by a person. In 1886, he officially registered his invention, known as the Benz Patent-Motorwagen. This moment is often considered the birth of the modern automobile. But there was still a problem. The world was not convinced. Many people saw the machine and didn't understand it. Some thought it was strange. Others thought it was useless. It was noisy, unfamiliar, and very different from anything they had seen before. Karl Benz had built the future, but no one was ready to accept it yet. What he needed was not just an invention. He needed proof. And that proof would come from someone who believed in him from the very beginning. By the mid-1880s, Karl Benz had built a working machine. The Benz Patent-Motorwagen could move on its own, and it was something the world had never seen before. But there was a problem. It wasn't enough to simply build it. People needed to believe in it. And at that time, they didn't. Many people saw the machine as a strange experiment, not a useful invention. It was noisy, unfamiliar, and even a little frightening. Some thought it would never replace the horse. Others didn't see any reason to try it at all. Karl Benz struggled to convince the public. He had created something new, but he didn't know how to show its true value. He needed a moment that would change people's minds. That moment came from someone unexpected, his wife, Bertha Benz. One early morning in 1888, without telling her husband, Bertha made a bold decision. She took the motorwagon and left home with her 2 sons. Her plan was simple, but risky. She wanted to prove that the machine could travel long distances, not just short tests. This journey became the first long-distance car trip in history. The road was not easy. There were no gas stations, no repair shops, and no clear maps for this kind of travel. At one point, the car ran out of fuel. Bertha had to stop at a small pharmacy to buy a liquid called ligroin, which was used as fuel at the time. In a way, this became the world's first gas station. During the trip, the car faced several problems. A fuel line became blocked, and Bertha had to clean it herself using a simple hairpin. At another moment, the brakes stopped working properly, so she asked a shoemaker to add leather to improve them. This was the first example of brake lining. She wasn't just driving the car, she was improving it along the way. People stared as the strange machine passed through towns. Some were shocked, others were curious. They had never seen anything like it before. A vehicle moving without a horse seemed almost impossible. But Bertha kept going. After many hours, she successfully completed the journey. It was not perfect, and it was not easy, but it proved something important. The car worked. Not just in theory, but in real life. When news of her journey spread, everything began to change. People started to see the automobile differently. It was no longer just an experiment. It was a possibility. And sometimes, that is all the world needs, proof that something new can truly work. After Bertha Benz completed her journey, something important changed. For the first time, people didn't just hear about the automobile. They saw what it could do. It was no longer a strange idea. It was real. Slowly, interest began to grow. More people became curious about the invention of Karl Benz. Some wanted to understand how it worked. Others started to imagine how it could be used in daily life. The idea of a horseless carriage no longer sounded impossible. Of course, change did not happen overnight. Many people still preferred horses. They were familiar, reliable, and already part of everyday life. Roads were still rough, and fuel was not easy to find. Early cars were also expensive, so only a small number of people could afford them. But the direction of the future had already changed. Other inventors and engineers began to build their own versions of the automobile. They improved the engine, made vehicles more stable, and worked on better designs. Over time, cars became faster, safer, and easier to use. One important idea began to spread. Transportation did not have to depend on animals anymore. This idea slowly changed cities. Streets became cleaner as the number of horses decreased. Travel became faster, and people could move farther than before. Distance started to feel smaller. New opportunities appeared. People could live farther from where they worked. Goods could be transported more quickly. Businesses could grow in ways that were not possible before. What started as one man's dream became something much bigger. The automobile was not just a machine. It became part of daily life. It changed how people moved, how cities developed, and how societies connected with each other. And it all began with a simple question. What if a machine could move by itself? That question led to years of struggle, failure, and belief. It led to one invention, one journey, and one moment that proved everything was possible. Today, cars are everywhere. We use them without thinking. But behind every engine, every road, and every journey, there is a story. A story of dreamers who refused to stop.